In this video, we're going to talk about the process of deletion and how we delete things. So here it says remove students with art history major. So if we go in here to do delete, we say delete from is the syntax. Notice that we don't have to say a column. We don't say what we're deleting because deletes work on entire rows. So they'll delete an entire row, not individual columns. But we do need to say what table it's coming from. So we're going to delete from user 1. And then here, this is really important that we do a where clause. Otherwise, we're going to delete everything in user 1. We want to specify a very specific deletion. And here we're going to specify where major equals art history. And that lets us be very specific about what we're deleting. So now we execute and we get a message. It says, oh, there's a reference constraint with a foreign key user ID and phone number. So we're using these user IDs in the phone number. So let's find out who these users are. So we can select user ID from user 1, and this will tell us, and again, we're going to use that same where clause, right? Where major is in art history, and let's find out. And there we get the SU numbers, and we can take these and we can copy them over here, and we say, okay, this turns out to be this user, and this turns out to be this user. So now that we have those two user IDs, we can go ahead and do deletes from the phone number because we have that information. So we can say delete, and we're going to do from phone number. So if we get rid of those, then we can go ahead and delete them as the user, and here we have user ID equals, and this is where we're going to get these two values. All right, where user ID equals that or that. And we execute it. Oh, and we get an error because we need a complete equality on both sides. We just can't say or the values, but we have to say where user ID equals this or user ID equals this one. So make sure when you're using or and that you have complete Boolean statements on both the left and the right. And now we execute it. This error is coming because I have it highlighted. So Management Studio, when you have an area highlighted, will give you an error. So I'm going to unhighlight it and execute it. And there it said 4 rows were affected. So we deleted them from that. So let's go back to our original delete where we want to delete them from art history and go ahead and execute it again. And here we get another reference constraint. And this one says it's in registration. So we got rid of the phone number conflict, but now we have a registration conflict where these users are showing up there. So let's go ahead and find out what's in the registration table. So let's go ahead and select everything from registration. And now we want to do it where? Now remember what we did before? We did a select to find out what was in there. And right, we wanted to select, and then we copied and pasted those user numbers. But it turns out that we can actually use a select in our where. So what we need is the user IDs, and notice when we do this select command, we get both of them. So we get, right, a listing of both of those. So if we take this select command, we can make it part of our query rather than copy, pasting, putting it back and forth. This can become part of our actual query. So here we add the where clause, and we say where user ID is in, and here we're going to make our list, and it's going to be this select statement. This select statement is going to return those user IDs. We're going to check for those ones that are in there. And that way we're actually using a select statement as part of our where clause. So when we execute that, we get all the registration information. So we see that these students have been registered for classes, they've received grades. Here is a problem. This is information, this is data that we don't want to delete from the database. If we have students that have registered from courses, they've been in the system, there's grades, this is data that we need to not delete. So here we've run into details where we cannot delete these users because of the information that exists in the system, the data that's in there that we don't want to just randomly delete. So notice that delete is a problem. And when you're going in to delete, you want to make sure that it's safe to delete these. Notice what we've done. We've deleted their phone numbers and not been able to delete them. So this is problematic. Those phone number deletions are gone and that information is no longer in the data. So always be really careful when you're doing deletes, that it's a safe delete and that you're doing it correctly. So let's go ahead and say that we want to remove this user, Tim Hansen. So let's try this. So this is going to be a delete from, and we're going to be deleting him from user one table. And the where part of this is going to be where first name equals Tim and last name equals Hansen. All right, now we're going to do a straight up delete and see if we get any conflicts. If they're not in any tables, we'll be fine. All right, here we go. We found out that Tim is in the phone numbers. Now let's not make the mistake we did before. Let's not delete this before we find out whether this is a person that we can delete or not. So let's go ahead and do a select. And I'm going to keep this information about this user because this will help us in our new query. So let's find out if they're in registration. So select, and we can go ahead and get all the information from registration. And let's go ahead and do the where clause where we know that the user ID is in, and use that select statement where we'll just select user ID where, and this is why I copied it, where select user ID from the user one table where first name equals Tim and last name equals Hansen. So here we have that select statement that we can use to ask questions about registration. And we run that and it shows up that he's not in registration. So let's check and see if there's anything else that this user might be in. So courses, there's no user in a course. Location, there's no user in a course. Phone number, there is, and we've already checked. We know he's in there, but we're okay sacrificing that. Prerequisite is just courses. Registration, we just checked. Section, there's a user. There's an instructor in section, so we want to check that as well. So let's go ahead and check section. I'm going to save this first. Okay, I want you to save this and turn this in as well so you see how to use that select statement in a where clause. But now I'm going to check section and see if he's in there. Oh, user ID is not in section. Remember that it is instructor in that table. So we're going to change it there and run it. And again, we come up with an empty result. So there's not in there. Now we know that we're safe. So they're not in any long-term information. It's just their phone numbers. So this might be a student that applied, then never ever registered for a course. And it's been long enough in the system that we want to get rid of. So this would be an okay time to do a delete. So now to do this, we're going to have to first delete him from phone number. So I'm going to use this where clause and I'm going to delete and no column information, but we're going to delete from phone number and we're going to delete where user ID is in, and we're going to select, right? And we're going to use this select as part of our query, and we're going to remove any phone numbers that are associated with that. And it says one row was affected. So here, to do this delete, we're first going to select and make sure we're safe, and then we're going to delete from phone number, and then we can go back and do that original delete of Tim Hansen. Delete from user where Tim Hansen. Execute that, and that row is affected. And there we have used those combinations of commands to delete Tim Hansen. And that's how you do delete. Always pay attention and be very careful about the process.